This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. Those of you out in Tulsa land, KRMG, looks like I'm going to be out there right after the election, November 7th, doing an election debriefing with you. If you text ARMY to 33777, follow the link. Put in your contact info. We'll be able to reach out to you when we lock everything in, so we'll be able to do it. Excited to start hitting the road with the stations. Now, I want to begin with a point I made yesterday. We're going to see tonight at 9 p.m. on CNN the Kamala Harris interview with Dana Bash on CNN. Donald Trump is already out saying, well, they're going to edit it, do what they can. Y'all, I'm not like worked up about this, and I know some people are. Whether I'm not in the camp, just full disclosure, I'm not in the camp that thinks they're going to like take this interview, rush it back to an editing room and cut out everything and repackage it to make Kamala Harris look great. I don't think you can. The lipstick on a pig line comes to mind here. You can't take Kamala Harris and edit her word salads into something coherent and passable without it being extremely obvious that this has gone through some sort of editing process to redefine it. Also, there's literally nothing I can do or you can do about it, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of emotional energy on it. The press these days is the enemy, but Dana Bash, I think, does a good job. She asked Joe Biden tough questions, tough enough that he was forced to get out of the presidential campaign. So I will wait for the interview to be over and judge it for itself on what Kamala Harris actually says in the interview. And keep in mind that she's going to say a lot of things that contradict her prior positions. So I'm not going to get super worked up about it. I actually want to hear her and her prior positions on what she says, the positions she takes, and we'll go from there. I mean, right now it's come out that Kamala Harris until 2019 never even mentioned anywhere in her political biography, personal biography that she wrote or on the campaign trail that she actually worked at McDonald's. It seems to be a new addition to her biography that has never come up despite her years in politics. And then, of course, there is the large record of things she has said, such as,
I am proud to stand with my colleagues and friends and support Medicare for All. I have always supported Medicare for All. I was very happy to sign on to Bernie's bill. I support Medicare for All. I always have.
But in your plan, eventually everyone would be taken off a private, the private plan that their company currently has.
Yeah.
Many people watching at home have health insurance of their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Yeah. All right.
Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders, only two that raised their hand.
Do you think eliminating private insurance would be a socialist idea?
No.
I'm running for president to say we need Medicare for all.
I strongly believe that we need to have Medicare for all. So Medicare for all is my plan. I support Medicare for all.
We will deliver that right with Medicare for all.
You get the point. She's for Medicare for all. She campaigned throughout 2020 on it, and then as vice president has said she wants it. So if she tonight is asked about it by Dana Bash, I have no foreknowledge of the questions, and she says that's no longer her plan, why? Why campaign it? Why campaign on it and then walk it back? And again, can we believe her? All of these statements, these are relevant points to be focused on as opposed to is an interview editor or not. And by the way, no, I don't care that she and Tim Walz are together doing an interview. Yes, I think it's notable that every other presidential candidate ever on both sides was able to do an interview standalone without their running mate in the room before then doing joint running mate interviews. The Democratic response of, oh, they did joint interviews to all these other candidates. Yes, but the first interview was always alone. The difference here is that this is a 4-week-old campaign, and she has wiped out every policy position she's had for the last 4 years. So you got to have Tim Walz in the room with her to figure out what they both believe today that they may not believe tomorrow, and they got to start over together because literally every position Kamala Harris ran on in 2020, her staff now says she does not hold. So Tim Walz has no idea to know what to believe unless he's sitting in the room and listening to Kamala Harris say it. Is there a fair criticism that by having them both together, it may neutralize some of the questions Dana Bash could ask as she pivots between the two? Absolutely. But again, nothing you or I can do about it. No reason to be worked up about it. We'll see it for ourselves tonight at 9. In the meantime, we have the story of Donald Trump at Arlington Cemetery. I have been multiple times to Arlington Cemetery and have filmed at Arlington Cemetery, including watching my child lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown. My kid did it for her school. Now, if kids have gone to Arlington, they do a wreath laying ceremony. You go get a good tour guide, they arrange it. And each school comes up, everybody's dressed up, they lay a wreath, and then what happens is, as that class goes away, an officer comes by, grabs the wreath, takes it, lays it in front of the tomb, and gets ready for the next class to do the same thing. And you get to watch multiple classes lay multiple wreaths. And at the end of the day, they're all lined up in front of the Tomb of the Unknowns. It's Tomb of the Unknowns, not Tomb of the Unknown Soldier anymore, because there are multiple unknowns buried there. And you get to film it. As a proud parent, you get to film your child laying the wreath. Anyone could film Donald Trump. Yes. Is this going to be turned into a campaign thing? Yes. Here's the problem with the media coverage of this. Joe Biden has used his appearances at Arlington National Cemetery in campaign propaganda. They're trying to be outraged about Donald Trump doing this when Joe Biden has done it. We know, however, that the Gold Star families invited Donald Trump to be there. They asked Donald Trump to participate. It was not a campaign orchestrated event, but the Gold Star families of those who died in Afghanistan. And if the media wants to talk about it being a crass political maneuver, I can't stop them. What I find very notable, however, is they've worked very hard to avoid the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden story of Joe Biden being on the beach. It's the anniversary of the 13 dead. When those bodies came home from Afghanistan, Joe Biden was seen checking his watch, and his campaign denied it, said it wasn't a true story. And even the New York Times had to pull out the picture that their reporter took and say, yeah, actually, he checked his watch while the bodies were being carried off the plane. Here's the picture. And then the families had to come forward more than once, reliving that sad day, and say, yeah, he tried to claim that his son died in Iraq, which he didn't do, as a way to connect to us. The fact that the media has chosen to give disproportionate coverage to Donald Trump over Joe Biden is, again, it's nothing you and I can control, but it is worth pointing out to the public. Whether you think this was a campaign stunt or not, one, Joe Biden has done them too at Arlington Cemetery, and two, Joe Biden, as a matter of fact, was nowhere to be seen and released a printed statement, as did Kamala Harris, who herself said she was the last person in the room. The spin from the Harris campaign at this moment is that, well, she was there to be a sounding board for Joe Biden. That wasn't the spin at the time, where Dana Bash, who's doing the interview tonight, asked Kamala Harris, you were the last person in the room with Joe Biden, were you not? And she eagerly wanted to say yes. And Dana Bash said, and you're good with the decision. And Kamala Harris said yes, comfortable with the decision. And look what happened. I hope there's a revisiting of that tonight. Interestingly, the spin now from the Democrats that even members of the media aren't really willing to let them get away with is that actually Donald Trump put Joe Biden in the position to have to make that decision, which is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. He didn't have to make the decision. He could have walked back the decision. He chose not to walk back the decision because Joe Biden thoroughly believed in the decision. I firmly believe at this point that Republicans do have to attack the media because the media is really not used to it. They don't like it. They don't like to be made uncomfortable. The media wants to be liked. And they don't just want to be liked by the left, but they're so in the tank for Joe Biden at this moment that you've got to rough the refs. And it is roughing the refs. And it is pointing out their biases. If they want to say, well, you know, Donald Trump has said very unkind things about the soldiers of the past. Look at his comments that John Kelly has confirmed he said about soldiers and not wanting to be around injured soldiers on that. Totally fine. You don't have to give him a pass on that. But you do need to do a better job of juxtaposing that against Joe Biden sitting on the beach in Delaware on the anniversary of the 13 dead and not doing anything other than a printed statement. You do have to juxtapose that to the families wanted Donald Trump at Arlington Cemetery. They wanted Donald Trump there. They believe they've gotten more attention and more comfort from Donald Trump than from their children's commander-in-chief whose orders caused them to die. If you're not willing to juxtapose those things, if you're not willing to give fair treatment to them, if you're not willing to cover them equally, you're in the tank for the Democrats. This isn't really hard. You are in the tank for the Democrats. I get all the Harris supporters and the people who don't like Trump saying, well, this was a campaign event and, you know, he said these terrible things about Gold Star families. He said these terrible things about the troops. Okay, that's fine. Cover them. But if you're going to ignore how these 13 soldiers died, you're on a side. And they are on a side. And we should point out that the Democrats in the press are carrying water for the Democrats on the campaign trail. 877-973-7425 is the phone number if you want to be on the program today. We got to talk about the polling, of course, because the polling has come out. A lot of people have jitters. You know, I looked at the polling, and I see Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump by a point or two in Georgia and maybe by a point or two in Nevada. And I looked at the polling and thought, this is actually really good for Donald Trump. She's ahead in all of these electoral college states, these swing states that matter. Donald Trump's up a little bit in North Carolina. By the way, the internal polling for the Democrats in Pennsylvania has Donald Trump ahead, and I know it because I've had several reporters tell me the Democrats are starting to get concerned she should have gone with Shapiro because Trump is still ahead in those states. This is actually good news for Donald Trump. Remember, he outperforms his polling by multiple points. The Democrats tend to underperform. And the Latino vote, the Hispanic vote, seems to be locking in for Donald Trump at a very high level. This is all good for the Trump campaign. This is all good for the Republicans. And by the way, in the polling averages now, which again, I tell you, follow the averages, don't follow the individual polling. John Tester, for the first time, is now behind the Republicans decisively in Montana, making it look like the Republicans could potentially capture the Senate. So there's a lot of good news out there. If the media wants you to believe is bad news, I want to spend some time on that, the polling direction. I'll take your phone calls. And again, we're going to start these live events starting in Tulsa, November 7th. If you will text the word Army to 33777, I'll send you back a link. Follow the link. Put in your zip code, put in your email, put in your name, and we'll be able to start reaching out to you guys as we start getting out on the campaign trail. It's going to be a fun, wild ride. We'll start right after the election on the campaign trail out there. And, oh, by the way, I got asked by a listener who said, I don't think you've talked about this story. And I replied and said, you know, I'm not good on taking listener requests because I know what you want. You don't necessarily know what you want until I tell you what you want to talk about. But my big story that we got to talk about later in the show today, the Venezuelan gangs taking over Aurora, Colorado, an entire apartment complex. People are trying to get out of their leases and flee because illegal immigrants from Venezuela in a gang have taken over in Joe Biden's America. We'll get there. Greetings, conversationalists. The phone number 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. And thanks to my friend Belinda for filling in on calls today as Charlie goes to the beach for his 2000th birthday or something. I think, you know, so my poor producer, I love the guy, got married later in life. He's got young kids and he's not quite as old as I am, but he's mid-40s, and they're headed to the beach. So glad to have Belinda in with me. Those of you who ever called into Neil Bortz's show, you know Belinda. Now, I got to note something for you. Ben Shapiro's noticed this. I've noted this as well, but I want you to watch for this. If you dare watch the Kamala Harris interview tonight, watch this. What you're going to see is when she begins to improvise and when she gets defensive, her hands become the hands of John Williams directing the orchestra as they play the theme to Star Wars. She starts swinging her hands wildly. She becomes a maestro. Just watch. Kamala Harris, when she's speaking and she's matter of fact, her hands tend to be in her lap or to her side. But when she starts trying to improvise and make points that aren't necessarily the truth, she gets defensive. She begins to swing her hands and they begin to fan. And by the end of it, she's in 4/4 tempo and she's got the orchestra going and she's calling out to the bassoons to fire it up and make some noise so the reporter can hear. You watch that tonight. If you watch the interview, you watch Kamala Harris's hands because you will know when she's lying. As her hands be. And I don't think it's a coincidence, as a matter of fact, as this has come up more and more, that you've got MSNBC with Michael Cohen out saying, oh, watch for when Trump does this gesture, he's lying. That was one of the stories of the day. I don't know what I don't pay attention to what anything Michael Cohen says on MSNBC, but they trotted out that story, and I think they did so out of a level of defensiveness, knowing that this story about Kamala Harris and people are beginning to notice. And it struck me probably about 4 weeks ago. I was watching some old footage of one of her CNN town halls, and they were asking her questions, and she was just very matter of fact, and then they pushed her, and the hands started moving. And as she went forward, the hands started moving more and more and waving through the air as if she was conducting an orchestra. And by the end of it, I felt like I needed to get on the piano just to provide some background music so she would have some music there in the background that she could be conducting. Y'all watch for this in her interview. For 877-973-7425 is the phone number. I want to actually give you a personal pitch for your home for Vision computers because I ran into this issue again yesterday with my kid. Y'all, well, first of all, I love them. If you call them at 404 Compute, they can build you a computer. They can build you a fantastic computer. But let me just talk about my personal experience. My son wanted a gaming PC. I used to be great at building computers and PCs and all that, and it's kind of over my head now. I'm a Mac guy. My son needed a gaming PC. He ran into a problem yesterday. It wasn't Vision's problem. He just didn't know how to do something on the computer. And Windows is so much more than it used to be when I used it. He called their tech support number. They answered immediately. It was not, they tell you like the average hold time is 15 seconds. It was not 5 seconds. I mean, he called maybe one ring. They answered it. He explained what he wanted to do, and bam, they gave him the answer. They can do that for you. It's what they do. It's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews. By the way, if you don't have a computer from them, you can pay them $179 a year and get the same level of tech support. Literally, it was like one ring. They say 15 seconds. It was less than that. Call them at 404 Compute. Let them build you a computer. If you need a computer, they'll work with you on exactly what you want. If you have a computer, they can be your tech support. VisionComputers.com or 404 Compute. If you tell them I sent you, you're going to get an even better deal. 404 Compute. My fellow Americans, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. I'll get to phone calls here in just a second, but I want to point out where the Real Clear Politics polling average is right now. You've got Trump is ahead of Harris in Pennsylvania. What's notable is that, and I was looking this up during commercial break, is that Trump tends to really overperform his polling in Pennsylvania. And in Wisconsin, Harris is up a point. And again, Trump tends to overperform his polling there. In Arizona, Trump's up 0.2, and the Arizona polling in 2020 and 2022 seemed to be fairly dialed in. Same in Georgia. If anything, Trump underperforms his polling, and that race is tied. And in Michigan, Harris is up 2.2%, which I can kind of believe. Nevada, Trump is up 0.6%. He tends to overperform his polling there. And in North Carolina, Trump is up 0.9 of a point, and he tends to overperform his polling there. Historically, when you look at 2016, when you look at 2018, when you look at 2020, when you look at 2022, where does Trump and the GOP tend to underperform and overperform their polling? In Pennsylvania, in particular, Trump tends to really overperform his polling. And that's a good sign for him that in Pennsylvania, he is in the polling average up 1/10 of a point, and he typically gets about 2 to 3 points more than that. It's a good sign for him. The Democrats are a little bit panicked because where they've gotten the race is back to February, March, and you still got 2 months to go. And Harris has not had a profound bounce from the Democratic convention, it seems. Now, let me get to Tracy's phone call here. Tracy, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. You've often said the media has chosen a side, the Democrat side. Dana Bash scored the first interview with Harris. Wouldn't it be in Bash's best interest to ask those tough questions and challenge Harris on the flip-flopping on issues or not having an interview until now? I mean, Bash could either be the reporter who brings down a campaign or the reporter that proves Harris can handle tough questions and prove to the voters that,
right.
she is not a flake.
Do you remember who Robert Novak was, the conservative reporter, columnist?
Perhaps.
Okay, Robert Novak. Okay, no. That's okay. Robert Novak was the angry conservative on CNN Crossfire for a long time, and he was a conservative journalist in D.C. He broke ranks with the Bush White House because Robert Novak's reporting led him to believe that the issues over Iraq were overstated based on his sourcing. A lot of conservatives kind of stabbed him in the back, and he felt betrayed. He was a very brilliant reporter. Learned to ask very tough questions. As an old guy, he sadly died of brain cancer a number of years ago. Dana Bash was trained by Robert Novak. And I bring that up because she knows how to ask tough questions. And she knows how to be probative without being combative in ways that generate news. So that's what I'm going to be watching for tonight. She could make or break the media. I think she understands going into this. She's got to be willing to ask tough questions. I will say this, Tracy. My concern is that unless she brings down Kamala Harris and exposes Kamala Harris as some sort of fraud, no one on the right's going to be satisfied by tough questions. And I will watch one of these interviews and think, those were good, fair questions. But because it didn't particularly help my side, I've got a lot of friends of mine on the right say, oh, she's clearly in the tank for Harris. Meanwhile, the Democrats are like, oh, she clearly tried to throw Harris under the bus. She's in a no-win situation. And honestly, I think that kind of frees her up. So, side note here on this. One of the things I've learned over the years, and it was actually my old boss, Pete, was one of the first people to tell me this. It's like you can't pay attention to the people who email you angrily or even the people who email you praise, because it is not a large portion of the audience that's going to do that. So you can't let it get in your head when people complain about you. Like I saw somebody this morning on social media complaining about I'm now on one of their stations, and they go online and they listen to the old guy who used to be there, that his show was so much better than my show. Well, I happen to know what my ratings are compared to that guy, and I assure you that that's not the case. But this is one of those fringe people. And if I was listening to those sorts of people online, I would live my day in a daily panic, worried about am I pleasing the audience or not. So you can't pay attention to that stuff. I think Dana Bash knows she can't pay attention to that stuff. But I will tell you, as someone who knows her, and by the way, I consider her a friend. Her son is much older now, but when I was at CNN, my wife made her a baby blanket. Her son was born, and my wife made him a blanket, a quilt. I like her very much. We don't always agree. I can be friends with people I don't always agree with. But I know her enough to know she's probably not paying attention to what people are complaining about online, recognizing a lot of it is roughing the ref. I will say, however, that there are questions I think are obvious that should be asked. For example, given all of the number of times Kamala Harris has said things on CNN, not on any other, I'm not talking MSNBC, I'm not talking about the other networks, I'm not talking about general statements, but in interviews on CNN, and Kamala Harris has directly contradicted herself this campaign season repeatedly, except she hasn't. Her staff has. I do think that it would be incumbent on Dana Bash to ask her about those policy reversals that staff have said she's reversed on and pin her down on. Have you really abandoned your repeated call for Medicare for all? And if so, why? Have you really decided that people don't need to have electric vehicle mandates now, as your campaign says? And if so, then how can you put distance between yourself and your own Biden-Harris administration that wants those electric vehicle mandates? Where do you separate yourself? Where do you separate yourself from Joe Biden on policy issues? You say you want to lower home costs. Well, here were home costs the day you came into office. Here are home costs now. Why aren't you responsible for those home costs? I do think those questions should be asked and answered. I'm not going to dictate questions to Dana Bash, but if they're not in that area, I will have questions as to what was the strategy here. We're learning about this candidate. She's been on the job for 3.5 years. She staked out all these positions that she now says she doesn't have. I want to know why, and I think the very first interview is the place to get those. Back to the phones. Bud, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show. Bud?
Hello, Eric. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful. I've got some simpleton questions here because you're the political guy and I'm not. Why the committee that's been running the country for the last 3 or 3.5 years and hounded Trump all during his presidency and probably ran the country the previous 8 years, why would that committee why would we think that committee isn't going to be running the country if Harris gets elected? That's my first question. And the second question is, can Trump change his vice presidential pick at this point in time? I think Nikki would have been a great choice as a vice president because I'm not convinced that the present vice presidential candidate pick could run the country.
Okay, let's deal with these in reverse order. One, I don't think Trump will abandon J.D. Vance. And I know some people. I got into nearly a yelling match on CNN the other night as some were trying to claim that he just might. No, he's not going to. He likes Vance, and Vance is actually really good impromptu on the campaign trail. Whether I agree with him on policy or not, but now let's. I'm glad you called because I've gotten this now a couple of times. But what committee is running the country?
I believe the Obamas, the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. I think they're the puppeteers.
Okay.
Amongst many more. Yeah.
So do you think that they were in charge of the country when Trump was president too?
No, but I think they hounded Trump so much that it made it difficult for him to run the country the way that he wanted to. He still got a lot of stuff done, but he was also fighting a lot of stuff at the same time.
Look, okay, so on this point, I'm glad you raised that because it is, without a doubt, in fact, they bragged about it in the newspaper at the time, that Barack Obama, when he left office and Trump came in, essentially set up a shadow cabinet. And the idea comes from British politics, where in Parliament, the Prime Minister and Cabinet have opposite them in Parliament a leader of the opposition and a shadow cabinet. So if you have for example, the Chancellor in Great Britain is our version of the Treasury Secretary. They have a shadow chancellor. They have a foreign minister. We have a Secretary of State. They have a shadow foreign minister on the opposition side. And Obama's team tried to do that and could seed media stories. Now, as we transition to Joe Biden, here's the thing. The Biden team, as it should now be obvious to everyone, they liked Pelosi and Schumer. They hated Obama. And I don't really believe that Obama ran the government in a committee. I believe it was, at the end of the day, Joe Biden's chief of staff, maybe his wife, maybe his son, and they would narrow down issues. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Joe Biden picked, but it was from a pre-selected slate of options for Joe Biden. And that tends to be pretty standard for how they would do things. We're going to see, if Trump gets elected, this opposition again. But you know what? The Republicans can do this as well. Republicans have a harder time because ultimately the media is more sympathetic to the Democrats. But Republicans can mount these sorts of oppositional shadow cabinets, if you will, if they want. That fell apart when Donald Trump left office because he moved to Mar-a-Lago, got distracted by the lawsuits, and a lot of the Republicans who are rah-rahing around Donald Trump right now actually hate his guts. I mean, the number of Republicans I know who are standing on stage with Donald Trump, they actually do want Donald Trump to win because they don't like Harris, but they would be totally relieved if he lost, is kind of staggering. It's part of the problem that Trump's going to have even when he comes back into office. The purity test, so to speak, for Trump, a lot of people are going to get in who are true believers who actually aren't. That's why I don't know that Trumpism within the Republican Party sustains itself beyond Donald Trump. The Republicans have that option if they want, however. Now, as to, let's go back to the VP issue. I actually really like J.D. Vance. We disagree on a lot of economic policy. I think J.D. Vance has said things that if he really wanted to be president, he should not have said. The single cat lady thing. I say stuff all the time I probably shouldn't have said. I'm getting lit on fire for something I said the other day off the top of my head. 3 hours of unscripted radio, said something gets me in trouble. I get it. Shouldn't have said it, but nonetheless, he does too. He didn't want to be president, nor do I want to be president. At the end of the day, though, this is a guy who was raised in poverty in Appalachia, largely raised by his grandmother, who herself had a troubled marriage that's been documented in his book and even the New York Times, elevated himself by going into the military, used the GI Bill to get a college degree, went to Yale for law school, and made something of himself. The problem that I have is that people, J.D. Vance age, he's younger than me, they look at America and they're not sure that they can ever really obtain the American dream, and that he looks at himself and says, I have, but most of my friends that I grew up with can't because of the world today. And I'm mad about that, and I think that it is the robber barons have stacked the deck against us. We can't bring them down. I've worked in venture capital. I know these people. I had to feel ashamed of where I came from working for these people, and we should use the government and right this wrong. That's Democratic thinking to me. It's not Republican thinking. Republican thinking to me, sadly, doesn't even exist much in the Republican Party anymore, and that is we should allow the creative destruction of the marketplace to work itself out, because we have added so much complexity to the world today that the middle class can't get ahead, and the complexity allows the rich to stay rich. I actually favor a society where it is as easy for a rich person to go bankrupt as it is for a poor person to go bankrupt. And right now in our society, the rich have all sorts of benefits in society due to its complexity that you and I don't have. And I'm getting there, thankfully, through success and hard work and the growth of radio, but I'm not there. But, I've gotten to the point now where I've got to have a strategic accountant to save me money that I shouldn't have to have, and you shouldn't have to have, that really rich people have to save them money because society's gotten so complex. And I look at that and think that's an injustice. And the solution isn't to raise everybody's taxes. It's to make it so easy to navigate that you as a smart person who are poor or middle class can make the rich person go bankrupt by the creative destruction of the marketplace. And we're not in that world right now. And that should be the solution. In fact, the world's so complex right now, it's harder for community banks to take off the ground, which are where most people would like to do business. You've got all these banks teetering on the brink of collapse. You got regulators out there making it more difficult to win. It's why Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years and wants to give you the report, The Secret War on Cash. They've been warning people about the secret war on cash for some time. If you're interested in safeguarding your hard-earned cash from the secret war on cash, get their free report, and it is completely free. By the way, they're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They can educate you on protecting your assets. They can educate you on the secret war on cash. You can get a free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency. It's spreading. So get the report. All you have to do is text my name, ERICK, to 800-289-2646. If you don't want to text, you can call them. If you're actually one of those weird people who likes to speak to a live human being on the phone, just mention my name when you call 800-289-2646 or go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric. SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. Message and data rates may apply. Greetings, conversationalists. The phone number is 877-973-7425. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, if you're buying a building, you're buying a franchise, you need a heavy equipment loan. First Liberty Building Loan's been making these business sort of decisions since the 90s. They make their own lending decisions. They'd love to work with you if they can. FirstLibertyGA.com. Get all their contact info there. Any business nationwide. They do business all over the country. FirstLibertyGA.com. I have to acknowledge the sad and tragic news that I got braces. Y'all, I am a grown man. I see you laughing over there. See you laughing, Belinda. I am a grown man with a mouthful of metal. I look like that babysitter from The Incredibles, except without the annoying voice. It is ridiculous. I have a mouthful. My wife and child tried to make me eat aluminum foil last night because it generates an electric shock, and they did not think I was smart enough to know that. I was a chemistry nerd growing up. I knew that what it would do to my mouth. It is not comfortable. And the downside of it, too, and with a practical note is given the clots and stuff that I've had in my lungs in the past, I got to take blood thinner forever now. I woke up with mouthful of blood this morning because these things, when you sleep, cut into your gums and your lip. It's just not fun. I don't know how people do this. It's like medieval torture that I'm supposed to have done when I was a teenager, but I'm now doing. So the backstory here is, a couple of months ago, I had to have a molar extracted because an infection got into it. It got cracked. Blood-brain barrier, all that sort of stuff. It was apparently not good. I had to scrape a bunch of stuff out of my jaw. Well, my teeth have been sliding around in my mouth after that. And I was doing Invisalign to try to straighten some stuff out. Can't do Invisalign anymore. Couldn't do Invisalign on air. I could not actually. My tongue more than once got stuck underneath the stupid things. So they made me go to this. I got off air at 3 o'clock yesterday. Was at the dentist's office by 3:30. I left at 5:30 because they had to take off the Invisalign attachments first, and they just ground them out. So they grind these things out. I don't know if you go through Invisalign, they put these attachments on to try to move your teeth around, and when they ground them off, they're like, okay, go rinse out your mouth and wash off your face. I was like, why should I have to wash off my face? I did not know. I went and looked at myself in the mirror. Y'all, I look like John Belushi on a 3-week bender with cocaine. There was like white powder all over my nose and around my face. I was horrified. I was like, I thank God no one had a picture. I'd be in like TMZ. I was like on a cocaine bender or something. It was horrific. So they grind all that stuff off. And then they put me in braces. First they put on the things, and then they connect the wires. It's uncomfortable. My mouth. I'm supposed to go have dinner with some friends of mine tonight. We've been trying for about a year to get together. Our schedule's finally aligned. I'm going to be miserable. It's going to be a liquid dinner. Probably not because I have to drive home. But still, y'all, I feel I have renewed sympathy for when my children went through their braces, and now they're laughing at me because I'm as old as I am and I've got braces. It's terrible.